love talking about this stuff, and I hope this is helpful to everyone. So this is a guide to APIs, and if you don't know what an API is, don't worry, we're going to cover that. So hopefully you know what it is at the end. Cool. All right, so let's go ahead and jump in. Here are the objectives for this session. I'll go ahead and just kind of explain real quick what I'm hoping you guys get out of it, but please, I want this to be as useful to you as possible, so if there's anything that we don't cover that would be helpful to you, just let me know. We can kind of adjust this as we go. But at a high level, what I would like you to leave with, at the end of the session, you're going to know what the Schoolrunner API is and how to access it. You're going to understand what kind of data is accessible through the API and what kinds of projects are possible. And I'm going to try to give you a few basic coding tips to help get you started if you're new to coding. Okay, so what is an API? API stands for Application Programming Interface. Basically, in terms of web development, provides a way to transfer data back and forth over the internet. APIs are used pretty extensively in web development. Just for any number of applications, but just two little examples. APIs do things like allowing your tweets to show up on Facebook. They allow, being able to embed Google Maps and other web pages. Tons and tons of things. So we're just covering one small slice of kind of what APIs are and what they can do. But yeah, that's what an API is at a high level. So before we talk about Schoolrunner's API specifically, I want to talk a little bit about, sort of to put it in context, like how you normally interact with data through Schoolrunner. And then we'll talk about how the API is a little bit different. So to assist with this, I have kind of an illustration here, courtesy of Microsoft Paint. And this is how I want you to think about it. So here we have Schoolrunner up in Denver, where it's based out of, right? And then here's you as the user. And how do you interact with data through Schoolrunner? Normally you do it through the user interface, right? Which takes the data and displays it on your screen in some kind of a graph, in some sort of pre-built dashboard that Schoolrunner provides, or in any other sort of visualization that Schoolrunner provides or allows you to build. Right? But it just displays it right there on the screen, which is awesome. It's cool for visualizing, but that's kind of it. It's sort of limited, right? If you want to do anything with that data outside of Schoolrunner, you don't have many options. Basically, you can download it as a spreadsheet and then figure out what to do with it from there, or you can just talk to somebody about it, right? But that's right now, that's sort of how you get data out of Schoolrunner. The API is a little bit different. I think of it sort of like a fire hose in terms of the amount of data and the type of data that you can, I think of it as sort of a fire hose in terms of the amount of data and the type of data that you can access through the API. So I have that sort of represented here with the fire hose, and I want you to notice I sort of drew this little nozzle at the end of it, which symbolizes how you can connect an API to other systems. Through a little bit of computer coding, writing a couple lines of code, you can actually take that API and plug it into other systems like your SIS, PowerSchool, Google Drive, other programs, and then from there, do anything like generating automated emails or creating other reports or really anything. So that's kind of at a high level sort of a metaphor for what the API is and what it can do. But we're going to talk more specifically about that now. So, Schoolrunner's API, what is it exactly? It's organized into endpoints, which are basically just different URLs for accessing different data sets. And what I mean by that is that endpoints for Schoolrunner's API sort of correspond to different categories of data. So if you think about going into the analysis page and building a report on the analysis page, when you do that, you're typically doing that for one main data set. So you might create a report on the analysis page to look at assessments or attendance or behaviors. Well, the API has an endpoint for each of those different data sets. But the API also provides endpoints for data sets that may not be easily accessible in Schoolrunner, or at least accessible in the way that you would want. So, and Schoolrunner has changed a lot over the years, and I haven't used it as a user myself in a year or so, so I don't know if this is still true, but I know that being able to access class attendance data used to be kind of hard in Schoolrunner, but it was very, very accessible through the API. Getting GPA data out of Schoolrunner was not super easy, or being able to analyze it was not super easy through the UI, but you could pull that data through the API. Even information like the status of Schoolrunner sync with your SIS is accessible through the API. So a lot of great information you can get through the API that you can't necessarily get through the regular web app. I've even heard that Schoolrunner uses their own API to develop and operate their website. There is a former developer at Schoolrunner who told me that they like to drink their own champagne. It's like a phrase that you hear a lot in web development. Basically just means that the developers of a web app will actually consume their own APIs to make it easier to develop new features. So Schoolrunner developing APIs, it's kind of a win-win. Like, it makes it easier for them to develop new features, but when they publish those APIs and make them accessible to us as users, it makes it so that we can do lots of cool custom things. So yeah, that's just a very common practice that you see in web development. All right, I'm going to give you a couple examples of projects I've worked on that use the API, just so you can get a sense of like really concretely, what are we talking about? So this is just very much scratching the surface in terms of what you can do with the API. This is just a handful of some examples I've worked on, but just to sort of get you thinking about what's possible. So I've worked on projects that generate email notifications to the data team about the status of our sync with PowerSchool. I've worked on projects that pull class attendance from the API to analyze it, which you couldn't necessarily do through the regular web app. Email notifications to teachers who forget to align their assessments to objectives, right? And I think if you attended Ethan's session this morning on auditing data, that's something that could be really helpful. Email notifications to parents when their child is failing a class. And I'm actually working on a project right now to generate notifications to parents when a child gets a lunch detention. Being able to generate network-wide graphs for academic, behavior, attendance data. I know on the analysis page it can be a little bit tricky to compare data across schools, but that's something you could totally do if you pull that data from the API. Even things like uploading student photos to Schoolrunner's website you can do through the API. So I'm going to show you a couple of screenshots now of just sort of what the outcomes of these projects have been. So this is like an example of an email that went out to the network data team at a school where I used to work, just to let us know how our PowerSchool sync was going. Emails to teachers about assessments that they need to fix. Even emails to parents about classes that the student's failing each week. And then network-wide graphs that compare data across schools. So yeah, just a couple examples right there. Hopefully that makes sense to you, or I don't know, maybe that gets you thinking about things that are possible. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and dive in now and have you very soon start accessing the API for your Schoolrunner site so that you can start looking at data through that. So if you're not already, please go ahead and log into your Schoolrunner site, and then I'm going to show you how you can find out or how you can access the documentation for the API and actually start connecting to it. Okay, so who in here is new to writing code or has never really written computer code before? Okay, that's cool. This is, if it's something that you're interested in, using Schoolrunner's API, like maybe doing some projects that involve the API is like a really great way to sort of start off learning computer programming. And the reason for that, just personally in my experience, I found that it's like easier for me to learn computer programming skills when I have a very specific project that I'm trying to work on or a specific problem I'm trying to solve, because that will then guide me in terms of like what I need to learn. And so if you have a specific problem that you're trying to solve at your school, a specific data project that you're working on, that's like a good incentive to learn those coding skills that will help you with it. And it provides like a good framework for like, what do I need to learn? So yeah, this is like a great opportunity if it's something that you're interested in. There are any number of programming languages out there for you to pick from. If you happen to know a particular language already that you're comfortable with, there's a good chance like it's probably totally appropriate for using it or working with the API. I mean, all kinds of languages, for example, Python, Java, Ruby. Most of the projects I've worked on have used Python, but that's just my preference. I'll tell you, if you're new to programming, Python is a great language to start with because it's relatively easy to pick up. The syntax is pretty simple. Python is also a language that has a ton of like online support. There's a huge community of Python developers out there, so it's really easy to find high quality tutorials online that will teach you how to write in Python. Python also has like a pretty big background, or pretty big community in terms of its use for application in like science and data. So there are a lot of sort of like third-party extensions and Python libraries that you can download that make it really easy to analyze and process data. So it's a great language for that. You can even build entire websites in Python. That's just my recommendation if you're new, but really any language would probably be appropriate. Something I want to go over during the lab when this is done is Google Apps Script, which is basically just it's like Google's version of JavaScript that you can actually connect directly with a Google spreadsheet and run and dump data from the API right into a Google spreadsheet. And it's pretty simple to get up and running. So that's really cool. It's something I've started using recently that I want to go over if it would be helpful. Okay, so a couple other points. Depending on the language that you're using, you may have to download or install extra libraries to connect to the API and parse JSON results. Pretty much all the major languages have some kind of built-in library, or at least a library that's easy to add on to do this. So for example, if you're using Python, there's a library that's called requests that make it really easy to do GET and POST requests. And you can find out more about that particular library here. You can even use Postman to see snippets of code to make it a little bit easier to get started. So for example, if you're using Postman and you have this API endpoint up here with whatever parameters you're using, there should be a little button kind of in the top right that says code. If you click on that, you should get a little pop-up box like this. And then there's a menu of all these different languages. And you can click on any of those languages, and then there are options for different libraries within that language. And you can see exactly what the code would look like to make this exact same API request in that language. So if you're using Python, let's say you're new to Python, and you're learning how to use Python for these types of projects, this is a great way to see exactly how to use Python to make this exact same request. Because you know, based on doing this up here, you know that this is the request that you want to make that gives you the data that you need. So here's how you would do that in Python. Now, why would you do that in Python or in any other language instead of just using Postman? Well, the reason is because if you have a language like Python or Java, Ruby, whatever, you can do a lot more with it. So Postman is just going to give you back that data in JSON format so that you can sort of see what it looks like. But you need a language, a computer language, to do a little bit more with it. If you want to take that data and put it in a database or analyze that data or generate automated emails, you need some kind of a programming language to kind of do that extra step. Questions so far? Okay. A few other tips I have. So the data that you're getting back from different endpoints, it's really going to be just for that particular data set. And what I mean by that is when you get back, let's say, data from the assessments endpoint, it's only going to be for assessments. So you're going to need to link that data up with information from other endpoints to really make sense of it. So for example, when you get back assessment data from the assessments endpoint, you're not going to see a staff member's name associated with that, or you're not going to see a course name tied to that. Instead, you're going to see a staff member ID and a course ID. So what you would have to do is, using that staff ID or course ID, link up that assessment record with data from the staff member's endpoint, or link that up with data from the course's endpoint. That way you can actually tie a staff member name and a course name to the assessment's endpoint, or to the data from the assessment's endpoint, to really see what it all means. Like, who created this assessment, what course is it for? Does that make sense? So there's a little extra work that you have to do there. I found for a lot of the projects I've worked on, it's really helpful to store data from the API in a SQL database and then use SQL queries to sort of link everything together and analyze the data and sort of get back the, do the number crunching and get back the results that you need. Questions? Okay. Most of the projects I've worked on, I've kind of pulled out these 4 common steps for what's involved. Pulling data from the API and parsing the JSON results using something like Python's request library. Saving the data in a separate database like MySQL or Postgres, something like that. And you can do that in Python pretty easily with a lot of different Python extensions like Python's MySQL DB library. From there, running a SQL query to sort of link everything together, and you get those results back, and then doing something with those results, like sending emails or saving a spreadsheet, making a graph, right? But these are sort of the four common steps at a high level. If you're new to coding, here are some resources that you can check out that I personally have found really helpful. And by the way, this is not super hands-on right now. If you're interested in this, if you stay for the lab, we're actually going to dive into some code and sort of get some hands-on experience with it. But these are just some resources that you can take with you. Is anyone familiar with Code Academy? Yeah, I found it to be really helpful. It's like kind of at a basic introductory level. If you're brand new to coding, Code Academy can help you get started. Coursera is an online education platform or service. They basically provide a ton of tutorials that oftentimes come from like regular, universities, college professors, that might be teaching a regular course at a university. We'll put that same course online. Most of the courses are free, and I found them to be fairly high quality, but they have a lot of great introductory courses into computer programming. Cloud9 offers what's called an online development environment. It's basically a place where you can write your computer code and run it. You don't have to do it in Cloud9 or in any kind of online development environment. You could write computer code on your local computer and run it there. But I found Cloud9 is really helpful because it's sort of got everything set up, right? If you're going to write Python on your computer and actually run it, you would have to make sure that you have the Python coding language installed on your computer, which can be kind of a pain to set up. But Cloud9 sort of already has all of that done for you. And I found it to be useful because I'm not limited to one particular computer. It's sort of saved online. There's another service that's called Python Anywhere, which I really, really love. Basically, it's another online development environment where you can write Python. In addition to other languages, it's not just Python, but it sort of focuses on Python. But you can write code there. They also provide MySQL databases so that you can store data from Schoolrunner in a database that you can then query. And they even have a scheduled tasks feature that allow you to schedule when Python scripts run. So if you want to do something like sending out automated emails to teachers, it's really easy to do through Python Anywhere because you can just basically say, hey, here's this Python script, run it at this time. And it'll just do that every day or every hour whenever you set it. So you can just go to pythonanywhere.com. They have you can sign up for a free account, which is awesome just to get started. Unfortunately, the free account will not let you make API requests outside of a very limited number of websites. So if you want to make requests to Schoolrunner in particular, to their API, you need to sign up for at least the cheapest paid version of Python Anywhere, which is like $5 a month.
If somebody requests them to add Schoolrunner to the whitelisted URLs, they probably will. They usually only require that it's like an official API, just so they don't get people like scraping maliciously on accounts.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
Yeah.
So you could probably email them. I've actually emailed with them a few times, and they're really responsive. But yeah, and again, it's $5 a month for the cheapest paid account, and that, has basically like covered everything I've ever needed to do. So yeah, it's really helpful. You can even, if you build like a little web app or website, you can host it pretty easily on Python Anywhere. So it's sort of like everything you need all in one place.